So you've been mapping and documenting human rights violations taking place in Sudan.
Yes.
Why and how did you get into the field?
So in 2018, November, when I went back to Sudan after 5 years, I ended up as a guest lecturer at Afad University for women. And it was from there that I got into the line of work of Os and How. A month later, in December 2018, the revolution essentially sparked in Sudan. And watching and seeing how the citizens in Sudan, especially my students during the time, were responding to it, I'm not going to lie, it was one of the most bravest, courageous things I've ever seen. Imagine now you're sitting in a classroom, you're teaching a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds, and then they get the news through their mobile phones that there's a protest happening outside, a demonstration happening outside on their main courtyard. So one by one, your students put up their hands and say, hey, we're about to leave. Can I go and join? Who am I to say no? You know, I'm just a guest. So eventually I saw my students run out. They started protesting. And these are girls. Women in Sudan have been very marginalized. So to see them become very active, it was moving. And then from there, just seeing the whole country kind of rise up, and I knew this was a moment in history that I couldn't just let continue and just go into nothing. So I had a really bad phone during the time and started recording. And then before you know it, on the 25th of December 2018, on Christmas Day, I ended up in Suq al-Arabi, where Sudanese Christians were celebrating, but they were also being attacked by security forces. And that doesn't sit right with any national Sudani. So it was standing in solidarity with them, but also you could say it was also to document that work. And from then, from 2018 going to 2019, I just kind of went along with it. And before you know it, I thought I was just documenting history. Turns out it's called open source intelligence.
So what are some of the challenges you have faced in collecting open source information in Sudan? And how has your work evolved over the years as the political situation has evolved there?
Well, first is connectivity, especially in a place where internet penetration is around 30%, and that the uploading of content of media onto platforms is quite difficult. Now, back in those days in 2018, 2019, the internet connection was actually a lot better than what we see now because of the destroyed infrastructure and the conflict in Sudan. Other issues I faced is, well, I found in the language barrier in terms of communications, like I'm diaspora, okay? Arabic was my mother language. The keyword here was, now it's English. I recently got my Arabic back. So trying to communicate what you see in Sudan to the people of Sudan was a bit difficult for me in the first place. So I think open source information helped bridge that gap. If I can't say it, well, hey, I can show it to you.
How has the information that you have collected over the years been used so far? Do you have any success stories? Do you have anything you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, it depends on how you want to view the success. Do you mean in terms of accountability and justice? Do we mean in providing safety and safe routes for civilians? During the 2021 Sudan coup, the work that I've been doing ended up later being used by Sudanese Archives that allows them to build a database on the crimes against humanity reported in Sudan. And it was quite impressive seeing that work finally being used properly. When you're under extreme stress and you find yourself in the middle of the thick of very dangerous situations, seeing organizations and initiatives like Sudanese Archives makes it feel worthwhile. And recently, with the conflict in Sudan, open source information has allowed me to facilitate the evacuation of over 400 to 500 people. And we're still continuing to do that evacuation.
What kind of a profile does one need to collect open source information? Can anyone do this?
Well, technically, yes. I've developed a very specific, nuanced of a profile. My background is in citizen journalism. My background is in community organizing. And if there's one thing I've learned, history does not decay into words, it decays into images. It decays into pictures. And so, for me, it was always a matter of, I see the moment in front of me, but at the same time, I want to capture it forever. Now, when it comes to, say, online, on the open source end, well, if you want to upload stuff, you have to be a credible person. You know, you can't just be a blank face with no name and nobody knows you. But it's going to take some time to build that credibility, build that rapport with the people who are going to be looking at your work.
What are some of the ways in which open source investigators build that rapport and collaborate with others?
So it's through being able to verify information that's seen on open source platforms, and as every time that happens, you get a sense of trust with the community, essentially community building with open source information, because one piece of information could be true or false. At the end of the day, it's public information. So the ability to verify that with multiple sources allows you to build a very nice community of people that you get to pick, you get to choose. I really like that. And one of the communities is investigations. And it's nice to know that you don't have to work a 9 to 5 to feel like you're making a change in the world.
You famously strapped GoPro cameras to yourself.
Yes.
And went to the street to document the violence.
Yes.
How did you weigh the risks when undertaking something like that?
Doesn't sound like I weighed the risks at all, did it? Well, I'll tell you how it went. So it was 4 GoPro cameras, yes, 1 to the chest, left arm, right arm, and to the back. I was wearing a black shirt, which said contraband, and which is an amazing group of people, a social initiative in Sudan, and yellow sellotape. And that is the most blatant, obvious target for any kind of security actor to go for. And so I put myself in a lot of risk at that point. But the protest itself was a pretty peaceful one during that time. Majority of the people were curious. They came up to me and they were asking questions like, hey, hi, that's interesting, okay. Why do you want to do this? And the reason why was to put all 4 together to create a 360 kind of panorama of the protest experience, the street experience in Sudan. So one day you might just wear a VR headset and you might just be in Sudan.
I wanted to ask you to speak about the toll of conducting investigations, especially in a dangerous and often violent context. As an investigator, how do you protect yourself?
For me, one of my rules is when I'm on the ground, I cannot stay in one location for too long. 24 hours max, move from location to location. So yes, it does take a toll on the mind and on the body as well. I've ended up appreciating things a lot more. When I eat breakfast, I enjoy it so much more, especially on the days I'm about to go out and protest. Who knows what could happen? So you become full of gratitude, and I think optimism is sustainable with gratitude. So yes, it does take a toll, but I find myself very grateful that I can do the investigations, and that I'm grateful to acknowledge that I'm in the middle of history and it's unfolding in front of me. And I'm one of the people who gets to record it. That's so amazing. So yeah, that's why I do it. Thank you.